Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. One of my viewers wanted me to talk about Nickelodeon's over-reliance on Spongebob Squarepants as content on their channel. Now, Spongebob Squarepants has been on Nickelodeon since 1999, and the show has been on that channel for over 25 years, and the viewer believes that it's time for Nickelodeon to end SpongeBob SquarePants and move on to other content. Now, the viewer really doesn't understand the entertainment industry like I do, so I'm going to try to explain why Nickelodeon is holding on to SpongeBob SquarePants and the reason why SpongeBob SquarePants is still on the air. Now, Nickelodeon basically has to deal with a very different world of media than it did when it was established in the 1990s, and the entire media platform has completely changed. So the reason why they're holding on to SpongeBob SquarePants is because they desperately need the show to maintain their identity as related to their brand, and they need the show to let everybody know that what Nickelodeon still stands for and that Nickelodeon still exists as a platform that appeals to children. Now, when it comes to most TV networks only keep content on the air not only for being able to identify their brand, but they also keep content on the air for two reasons. One is ratings, and two is ad revenue. Now, when it comes to TV networks, what really allows them to be able to charge high rates for advertising is the ability to get ratings, and that's what makes the ad revenue come in for these TV networks that allow them to make the money to stay on the air. And with SpongeBob SquarePants being the #1 show on Nickelodeon, they basically are keeping that show on the air because it basically can make money for the network, and with that show's ad revenue covering all the costs of the production of that show, they just keep it on the air because the show is profitable to the network. And as the show is profitable to the network, they have no reason to cancel a show that's making money. And that's the main reason why the network is keeping SpongeBob SquarePants on the air almost 25 years later, because the show continues to make money for the network and continues to get high ratings. And in this extremely competitive television and media marketplace, when a show is making money, networks just don't cancel them anymore like they used to in the days of television from the 50s all the way up until about the mid-90s. Now, from the 1950s all the way up to the mid-90s, usually networks didn't keep TV shows on the air for an extended period of time. No, usually the length of a TV show was from 5 to 7 years. And this was usually done because the networks basically wanted to give actors a chance at getting a break from the roles that they had, one. Two, they wanted to go out here and take risks on other TV shows that could generate possibly higher revenue. And three, they didn't want the shows to get stale when they resold that content into platforms like syndication. And that's why they would basically end shows from 5 to 7 years, because it usually, once they had hit that 5-year mark, the show had already hit profitability, and they could basically resell the show in syndication once it hit 5 years or got 100 episodes. So usually the networks could go out here and create secondary and tertiary revenue platforms for themselves from these shows. However, in today's competitive media marketplace, the landscape has completely changed. And since the landscape has completely changed, many TV networks are holding on to shows much longer than they did in the days from the 50s to the 90s, because these days we have TV shows like The Simpsons, which have gone on for 37 years. We have shows like NCIS, which has possibly gone on for about 21 years. We have shows like I believe CSI has gone on for over 20 years. And Law & Order, which has gone on for over 25 years. And these TV shows have gone on to have longer runs than some people have had professional careers in white-collar and even blue-collar jobs. And that's mainly because the entire media marketplace has completely changed, and many studio executives would rather just keep a show on the air that continues to generate revenue rather than end that show and take a risk that could lead to the entire network going into a major slump that may take 5 to 7 years to get out of. Because in the past, what they would do is you would have a network that would start canceling shows, and they would cancel shows, and they would basically wind up in a rating slump, and that rating slump would basically hurt their overall ability to generate revenue for a period of time. So a lot of networks don't want to go through that kind of slump that networks used to go through, like CBS went through in the early 90s and late 80s when they had a lot of cancellations, like NBC went through in the 70s where they almost went into bankruptcy, and like ABC went into, I believe, in the mid-2000s or so like that. The networks cannot afford to go through those kinds of slumps anymore because they're no longer a big three of networks anymore. No, ever since the late 1980s when we got Fox coming in, that made it 4 networks. Then in the 90s we got UPN and the WB, which made it 6 competitive networks. And then what happened is we got Ion Television, again that was 7 networks, plus we got 500 cable channels. So with such competition, all of these channels really, they are fighting for a shrinking audience, because with each network you get a smaller slice of the pie, and that's what makes it where networks are out here not really thinking about canceling content, because it's very hard to get the financing for content, 1, and 2, it's hard to get content to be able to build an audience with there being so much competition. And in today's media landscape, we're in the aftermath of the Telecom Act of 1996, which led to the consolidation of media of the 500 channel universe, plus the addition of streaming. We have so many different choices for the audience that a network cannot really be too choosy about what they keep on their platforms, because they can't really afford to take the risk. They really can't afford to take the risk, because if they cancel a popular show, that basically makes it where a competitor can fast come in and get that audience, in a world where we have not only these television networks as related to broadcast and many sub-channels on those broadcast networks, because we not only have CBS, NBC, and ABC, we have sub-channels like Localish, sub-channels like Cozy TV, sub-channels like Antenna TV, sub-channels like Catchy Comedy, that's just on broadcast, and this, not to mention the hundreds of cable channels, not to mention the hundreds of streamers, and not to mention the millions of YouTubers like myself. I mean, it's a lot of competition out there these days for the audience as related to getting their attention, and a lot of audience have so many choices that they basically are overwhelmed by them. And with the audience being completely overwhelmed by those choices, many network executives would rather just play it safe and keep the shows that are making them money on the air, because if you cancel that show, what will happen is it will create a void, and that void will make it where customers will, or viewers will, go out here and find another channel to go out and watch, or even worse, leave television altogether and head over to places like YouTube, which is what's been happening, because TV lost 50% of its audience during the writer's strike. And after losing 50% of their audience due to the writer's strike, what has happened is they want to hold on to the shows that do go out here and get an audience, because that allows them to go out here and be able to get those ratings that allow them to charge the rates that they can for ad revenue. So that's why you'll see a show like Spongebob SquarePants on the air, because the studio basically and the network just can't afford to go out here and take the risks like they used to. because again, when you have a lot more of the pie, that makes it where you can feel more comfortable about taking risks. And in the days from the 50s to the 90s, before we got the Telecom Act of 1996, a lot of these studios, again, had to go out here and compete with each other, and they competed for a portion of the pie. And since they had to compete for that portion of the pie that was very large, it incentivized them to be able to go out and look to take those risks on TV shows that were new and different. But it's hard to take a risk on a show that's new and different when you've got little slivers of pie as related to the network, to the percentage of audience you can get. I mean, the percentage of audience you could get from the 50s to the mid-90s, I mean, from the 50s to the 80s was basically, you had the three networks that had 33% of the pie as related to the pie overall in many media markets, because that had the big three. But if you had the big three plus syndication, and PBS, these guys basically had at least about 20 to 25% of that pie, and they had a bigger piece of the pie, which made it where they could go out here and take risks because they had a more captive audience. But as that pie began getting further cut up by the Fox network, by independent networks like the UPN and the WB and all the cable channels, and then after cable channels we got the rise of the media platforms like YouTube, and then we got the rise of the TV going digital in 2009, creating even more channels. Plus we got the streaming coming up in the 20 teens. I mean, and it's just the pie has gotten so small. So any show that you've got that's making money, you're going to keep on the air as long as you can, and you're not going to think to finance a brand new show unless you have to, and that's usually something that they do. And again, that's what happened, as the viewer talks about Butch Hartman and Fairly Odd Parents, where Nickelodeon executives basically added all those characters and ruined the show. But the whole thing is that that was because they were afraid to create a new show. But then they eventually did create a new show, the viewer says, as The Loud House, and got the #2 rating. And they believe that they're going to keep that show on the air for too long. But the whole thing is networks keep shows on the air long because these are the shows that they need to make money, and they need to make this money on these shows, so they keep them on longer. And they really don't take risks on brand new shows like they used to in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, where they used to take risks on new shows because they fear they won't be able to get the audience. They fear they won't be able to get that young audience like they used to, because there's just so many choices. And with the younger people having choices to go out here and watch YouTubers like myself and many other people out there, many people are choosing to watch YouTube and other content. And that's what really hampers many of the studio executives in greenlighting new projects, is that they fear there won't be anybody to pay attention. But the whole thing is that, yes, you do need to go out here and make new content. You have to take that risk. But you have to understand that the risk is how you get the rewards, and this is something many executives really don't understand. Sometimes you have to take a risk to get a reward, and the whole thing is you have to go out here and calculate your risk. But a lot of studio executives are afraid to do that. They're afraid to fail these days because there's so much at stake as related to creating content that creates revenue. I mean, there's so much at stake these days, so a lot of these guys are scared to death. They're scared to death of having a failure, because one failure can basically lead to you going from a TV executive to being unemployed, and that's what these guys are afraid of. And if you go out here and knock off a flagship, it could basically destroy a network. Now, Nickelodeon originally had lots of great content in the mid-2000s that it was known for, like The Victorious Show and many other shows like All That. And in the 90s, it was known for The Amanda Show with Amanda Bynes, but it no longer has that variety of content. It only has SpongeBob, so they need SpongeBob to be their mascot for their brand. So I don't really see SpongeBob leaving the air anytime soon. But when I think about Nickelodeon, they really do need new content. they need new content from creators, but the whole thing is they've got to get that courage to take the risk on that content. But these days, studios are not taking risks on content because they want to have a guaranteed audience. This has been done ever since about 2000s, in the 2000s. I mean, they used to make movies, it was usually from best-selling novels or very popular things like comic book series. They would adapt that material because they know that there would be a possible audience for it. So that's why they go out and pick that type of content. And this is what the networks do. Again, they pick content based on where they can build a base of an audience from. They're not going out here just throwing stuff at the wall like they used to in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, in the 70s and the 80s, when I was growing up, they used to take risks on content, but and really walk away from the popular book series like Encyclopedia Brown back in the day. But these days, they would go to those kind of things because they want that already established audience. And right now, when it comes to stuff, it's hard to get to create an audience and build an audience because there's so much content and so much content coming at people that it's hard to really get any sort of percentage of the market to ensure that you're going to make a certain amount of money. So that's the reason why SpongeBob is on the air, because SpongeBob is an established brand. I mean, he makes millions of dollars in merchandise, millions of dollars in licensing, and the studio and the network are going to keep that show on the air because it's going to make them money, similar to what's happening with The Simpsons. I mean, The Simpsons has been tired since about 2000. The show basically ran its course, but it continues to sell merchandise and has been licensed for action figures at least 2 times. In the last, I think, about 15 years, I've seen toys coming, I think, from Jax. I think I've seen some toys coming from McFarlane. And I remember the first wave of Simpsons figures from Mattel. And there have been wave after wave of Simpsons merchandise. And again, if a show can continue to make money, the studio's going to keep it and the network's going to keep it in production, because this is going to be a way for them to generate revenue to finance other projects. And they do finance other projects, but that takes time for them to build an audience. I mean, Fox recently took Family Guy off of Sundays and now has these other shows like a Crapopolis and some show about big guys doing something. And I mean, they have other shows on right now, but the whole thing is a lot of these shows are staying on the air longer because they want to get the licensing, they want to get the merchandising, if they can, for animated programming, because animated programming isn't just about the animation. Animated programming is a merchandise juggernaut, and there's lots of great concepts out there that could be turned into cartoons, and that just the studios have to learn to take a risk on them. And again, I really wish that they would take more risks, because it would be a great reward, because we've lost Gen Z, we've lost Generation Alpha, and we're about to lose the next generation of kids who need to have their own concepts and own culture, media that shows their view of the world. That's the other thing that's missing from this whole situation, is where a lot of kids are not getting a chance to get their stories and their life experience out there, because the money of these businesses basically want to keep these shows on the air for an extended period of time. And again, this is all due to, again, all of the issues we've had with media as related to, again, there being this 500 channel universe, media consolidation, and everything being about money and profit. And again, businesses are only going to do what makes money, and that's why we're possibly going to be seeing SpongeBob SquarePants for an extended period of time, way into the far future. Now, I hope this video explains everything to the viewer regarding the entertainment industry and why shows stay on the air for an extended period of time. Now, this was a video requested by a viewer, and if you want to request a video, you can drop a donation for a minimum of $15 to the PayPal or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my books that feature action-packed stories in the SJS Direct universe, you can find those books such as the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my Black Sorority novel, The Thetas, and my Black Vampire novel, Eternal Night. You can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam: The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam: The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.